We are delighted to come together on this Sabbath afternoon, having been filled with your word and the service, having a beautiful service, a beautiful meal. And we thank you that we get to talk about you, Lord, and to move a little closer to you by what we're learning and what we're sharing. So thank you so much for being present here through your Spirit, in your Spirit, and thank you for blessing those who are willing to lead us. In your name, Lord. Amen.
So I just want to pass a couple pictures around. This is going to come up later. Okay, this is a nice scene that my mother painted back in 1978. Okay, that goes back a few years. She does a lot of watercolors now. And then just for a little something to talk about. It's my son Travis on the Colorado River. He did some river rafting guiding for summer work. He called it work. We call him homeless. He had a Ford Escort wagon that he
called it what?
Homeless. That he put a bed in and all his stuff in totes, and he lived out of his car for the whole summer.
Wow.
So Lori's filling out applications for him and asked for his address. So we'll come to those, I think, before the day is done here. I was just thinking that was bigger, but I guess it is what it is. So just to kind of review last week a little bit, that looks awful small to me. You guys?
I see it.
Yeah.
It's good.
It's a little bright.
We were having a little trouble with the dates and the times and the decrees when we ended chapter 1 with Cyrus. Okay, he was a type of a Messiah, and we were kind of coming up with those. And so, just for clarification, the first decree of Cyrus, 536 BC, he lets the people go and begin to rebuild the city. Okay, and then the second decree, Darius, 520, he sends an encouragement of rebuilding the city and the temple. And yet the third decree by Artaxerxes, this decree says that they are going to live under the laws of their own God. That's really the completion. Okay, that's the completion, because now they've got the temple, but they can govern themselves. Okay, but Daniel 1 ends with Cyrus. Daniel lived until the time of Cyrus. So Cyrus is a type of Messiah, so there's the God battle, the Babylon, and Christ wins in the end. Christ is victorious. So I just wanted to throw that in there real quick.
That long story.
There are actually 2 books in the book of Daniel. Daniel chapter 2 verse 4 starts one book, and that goes through the end of chapter 7. And then chapter 7, and this is written in what? Does anybody know?
One one's in Hebrew, one's in Aramaic.
Okay, so Aramaic is the first section of Daniel. Okay, that was the common language at the time. Who wrote in Aramaic? Who wrote? Who was writing that? Okay, Nebuchadnezzar himself. Nebuchadnezzar is writing. He's given a report. He's given an account of what physically happened to him. So this is a story that was intended to reach the common people at that time. That was the common language. That was a story that was intended to go out.
He wrote Daniel 4. I'm sure he wrote Daniel
So Nebuchadnezzar wrote that?
Nebuchadnezzar,
There's a quotation from Nebuchadnezzar.
Nebuchadnezzar wrote
This
Daniel
decree.
4. That was his story.
That could be. My notes was Daniel 2, 4 through chapter 7.
That was,
Was
in
in
Aramaic.
Aramaic, right.
Yeah. But Nebuchadnezzar himself wrote Daniel 4.
Okay, all right, okay. So, thanks for the clarification. You know, we read in Exodus, we all know this, thou shalt not make unto thee any graven images or any likeness or of anything that is in heaven above or is in earth beneath, okay? And yet what do we get? We get an image. God is giving Nebuchadnezzar a dream of an idol. We'll see that the first 7 chapters use idolatry as images.
Well,
Explain that.
The Hebrew language that begins in chapter 8 begins to use the sanctuary terminology. Okay? So we have idols, idol worship, idol practice. So this is an idol that's set up. It becomes an idol, right? He commands everybody to bow down to this. And so we see God here trying to reach Nebuchadnezzar through a language, through symbols that he and the people of that day would understand. What does Daniel 2:6 say? Let's look up Daniel 2:6.
What about if you show the dream and the interpretation thereof?
Okay.
But if you show the dream and the interpretation thereof, ye shall receive of me gifts and rewards and great honor. Therefore show me the dream and the interpretation thereof.
Okay, so who's saying that?
The king.
Okay, so the king is saying, if you do this for me, I will reward you. And if you can't do this for me, what happens? Yeah. Okay. And so we see this is a type of, this is Satan's kingdom. We're going to see this. We'll see this over and over. Artificial rewards and punishments. Why do we use the word artificial rewards?
He can't give the real reward.
Okay.
It's not no permanence, right?
No permanence, okay. We get a lot of short-term satisfaction, right? And that's why on Table Talk he keeps talking about, you know, you gotta push your mind through your feelings, what feels good. Artificial rewards and punishment. Ultimately, the gift is death, right? When we follow God's way, we are damaging our bodies, and we're actually bringing death on quicker.
Satan's ways.
Satan's way.
Thank you. Satan's ways.
Because verse 5, the king said, my decision is firm. If you do not make the dream known to me and its interpretation, you shall be cut in pieces and your houses shall be made an ash heap. So this was just the king's decree. He made this consequence.
Okay. And yet in God's kingdom is set principle and natural causes, consequences. Okay? So if one gets behind the wheel of their car intoxicated and they're driving, is God going to cause that person to possibly have an accident? Probably not, because those are the natural consequences. So when we step outside of God's kingdom into Satan's kingdom,
The consequences.
Well, why is gift pluralized in both? Gifts of death, not gift of death. Gifts of life.
okay. So these are the characteristics of God's kingdom.
That was a question.
No, it was probably the gift of death, right? Gifts.
Okay.
I don't know.
Okay.
Well, the artificial rewards are gifts of death.
Right.
I mean, the because aren't they connected? Our
That's it.
official rewards,
Okay, that makes sense.
our gifts of
Okay, that makes sense. And
Right.
consequences,
Our
again,
gifts
for,
of
okay.
life.
Right.
I just, yeah, thank you.
Daniel 2, 7 through 13, what are we talking about here? Would like to read that?
Once more they replied, "Let the king tell his servants the dream, and we will interpret it." Then the king answered, "I am certain that you are trying to gain time because you realize that this is what I have firmly decided. If you do not tell me the dream, there is just one penalty for you. You have conspired to tell me misleading and wicked things, hoping the situation will change. So then tell me the dream, and I will know that you can interpret it for me." The astrologers answered the king, "There is not a man on earth who can do what the king asks. No king, however great and mighty, has ever asked such a thing of any magician or enchanter or astrologer. What the king asks is too difficult. No one can reveal it to the king except the gods, and they do not live among men." This made the king so angry and furious that he ordered the execution of all the wise men of Babylon. So the decree was issued to put the wise men to death, and men were sent to look for Daniel and his friends to put them to death.
So, under Satan's kingdom, there's commands, there's rewards. You're kind of in a fight or flight situation, right? These guys are fighting for their lives. They're fleeing. And how does that oppose to Revelation 21:8 and Revelation 6:15 and 17? How does that compare to God's kingdom?
Well, verse 16 in Daniel 2 says, so Daniel went in and asked the king. So these other guys were running. They were going to go run and hide. And Daniel just steps up and goes to the king. So he's not operating on his feelings. He's operating on principles.
Okay. Someone have Revelation 21:8?
Yes. But the fearful and unbelieving, and the abominable, and murderers, and whoremongers, and sorcerers, and idolaters, and all liars shall have their part in the lake which burns with fire and brimstone, which is the second death.
In Revelation 6:15 through 17, I'm not sure that Revelation 21:8 was the right text.
Well, they're the opposite, right?
Well, you're
Those are
right.
the
Yeah,
bad people.
you're right. These are the fear and the cowards. Yeah, these are the
Yeah.
cowards. Yeah,
Because he's telling his good people.
right. Yeah, you're right. Revelation 6:15.
And the kings of the earth, and the great men, and the rich men, and the chief captains, and the mighty men, and every bondman, and every free man hid themselves in the dens and in the rocks of the mountains, and said to the mountains and rocks, fall on us, and hide us from the face of him that sits on the throne, and from the wrath of the Lamb. For the great day of his wrath is come, and who shall be able to stand?
Okay, great question. Who shall be able to stand?
Jeff, it's really quite interesting that, because you see that dynamic now. Suddenly, these astrologers, magicians, Chaldeans, sorcerers, their reality has just been bashed to shreds. I mean, they've been put in a position where it's impossible for them to figure this out. And I don't know, we don't get the details in Daniel 2 about what led up to this dream, what led up to, the king calling out all these guys, because I think maybe with his experience with Daniel, maybe he's seeing these for who they really are, and a bunch of shysters who really don't know what they're doing, and they're living in this cushy world of theirs. And suddenly he said, "Well, I'm gonna put this to a stop right now," and whether by the Lord revealing to him or a wisdom that he has gained as being a king, he put these guys to the test.
He did.
Yeah, he put them in a situation where there's no way you're going to get this unless you truly are who you say you are.
Yeah. And we see that a lot in real life, whether it's our kids, our spouses, ourselves, a lot of times we misrepresent the truth. You know, we lie. We try to get, and most of us, we don't like conflict, right? So we hear it, but do we argue with it? You know, who here really likes to go buy a car? You know, you hear everything great about this used car, and you know he's not telling you the truth, but you're not gonna confront him, right? Because you're a civil person, and yet you know he's lying through his teeth, or somebody. It's probably not a fair person to pick out, a salesman, but you know what I
Not
mean.
me, I like playing ping pong.
And even though when these guys are not always giving Nebuchadnezzar the truth, I mean, he knows, you know, and so he's to the point where you're right, he's going to call him out. Jeff?
You had the same battle going on between the magicians in Egypt and Moses. Same battle. And they were able, up to a point, to mimic what Moses had done, what God had done through Moses. But after a while, they said, this is the hand of God.
Right.
And they were humbled.
Right.
Even though Pharaoh wasn't yet.
Right.
Wow.
And that's what's so fun about going through these stories. You see this repetitive action over and over. So in this case, as Lori read in verse 16, Daniel goes in before the king, right? Daniel's running to the king. Daniel's willing to face the fear. What's the little song? Sounds good.
Dare to be a
Dare to be a Daniel, right? Daniel's facing the fear because of the principle that he's learned. Okay, he's not scared to die.
This is, you know, and it doesn't say till afterwards that he and his friends got together and started to pray and started to, you know, gain this wisdom from God. But he was going in there with confidence that God is going to answer this thing.
Absolutely.
He went in.
Absolutely.
He went into the king just knowing that's a great faith that he had. This wasn't presumption that he had. He had established a relationship with God where he could go to this king and boldly tell him that, you know, I'll have an answer for you.
And that's what
Yeah.
we talked about last week,
Yes.
is that, you know, God's going to reveal more and more to us. But if we can't be faithful in the little simple things, these
Yeah.
things just aren't going to happen.
Yeah,
You know, they're just not going to happen.
yeah, we're seeing that little test, and suddenly the tests are getting a little bit tougher now.
Right.
Yeah.
And those little tests isn't necessarily God's part working with us, or are we beginning to become to a point that we trusted God in the little things enough that we're willing to trust God more? You know, I think sometimes we have a tendency to say, well, you know, if I do this, God will trust me. God will give me more responsibility. So Daniel's actions here are based on principles, not on feelings. How does this compare to the story of Esther?
She had confidence in her God.
She did, right?
Yeah, it was cold. She would have faced death. She had, just like Daniel, they would have faced death if the king said, "No, I'm not listening to you." Right? Isn't that he had to hold out his scepter for her to live?
Right.
Right. And I'm sure there was something akin to that here. If he didn't want to see Daniel, Daniel would have been killed on the spot.
Absolutely.
Wow.
Well, I think Nebuchadnezzar learned to trust Daniel.
Right.
He
yeah,
knew
chapter
Daniel.
1. Yes.
He's
yeah.
knowing him pretty
Yeah.
quick now, isn't he?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Now this is pretty interesting. And again, this is the pastor speaking his notes. When a kingdom or government is initially established, it relies on mysticism. Think about that for a moment. What does that mean? What does that mean? As they progress, they rely on materialism, science, humanism, technology. So back to the Egypt story. You know, the sorcerers, they could throw down their canes. They could make them turn into snakes. You know, they want to keep mystery in there, and that's what brings people into the religion, because they don't understand. There's a wow, Brian.
Right.
there's like this secret power there, and they want you to learn those secrets, etc. We were talking about that the other night, and it's mystical. There's this mysteriousness about it, but there's also this euphoria in it too. It's euphoric in the sense of when you gain that power, when Satan gives you a little power. There's this euphoria, and it's not power to praise God; it's power for oneself. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So there's this mystic. That's the basis of false religion, is mysticism.
Although mysticism in this case like America was established on principles of religion, and now we've become more materialistic and we rely on evolution and science, so mysticism doesn't always mean, spiritualist. It also means a god, so whatever form your god took.
Right.
So, I don't know, just to think of an example, and I might be even off base on this, but originally the Israelite people, their foundation was a theocracy. So when they asked that they could have a god or a king, so they could be like the other nations, were they leaving the mystical and going into the material? Does that make sense? I don't know. It was just a thought I had. I don't know if they were progressing.
Yeah, I think so. I think that makes sense. Yeah. Because they wanted a human king.
They relied on their
Right.
castles, their walls. They
Right.
relied on getting the
Exactly.
great walls and
Sure.
protecting Jerusalem and having the
Mhm.
technology to protect it, instead of relying on God.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point. Yeah.
Well, and they had, they allowed the traditions and philosophies of the surrounding nations and the religions of the surrounding nations to seep its way into their kingdom.
Right.
Not
So-
only allowed it, they were inviting it.
They were inviting it,
Right.
yeah, they were inviting it, they were doing it,
Yeah.
so that they became the other kingdoms.
It was their decline, sure.
So as we go through this process, morality will continue to decline. The degradation of society follows the same pattern.
And he also says, Ali asked him, what was the end result of this progression?
They always fall, even when they look like they're at the pinnacle of success.
Yeah. That this progress, materialism, science, humanism, technology, it ends in the destruction of that kingdom.
Because you're replacing the wisdom of God with human wisdom. So whether it's Eve or Babylon or
And with every great society, you can even see, if you look at the four statutes, even if
Yeah.
you look in history, there was a
Greece,
great
sure.
moral decline
sure.
of all these
Yeah.
great empires before they succumbed to the barbarians. Yeah, the
Sure.
barbarians at the gate, if you will.
The,
Yeah.
the Roman Empire.
Right.
The rise
was
of
the
all.
last. Sure. Sure.
Verses 17 and 21 talks about changes the times and seasons. So God
King's prayer.
changes the times, God changes the seasons. Kings setteth up kings, giveth wisdom to the wise, giveth knowledge,
To them that know understanding.
revealeth the deep and secret things. Isn't that interesting? There's 7 positive attributes as we come down through the line. And then if we compare that to Genesis 1:3, what does Genesis 1:3 say? Can't get much more to the beginning of the Bible than Genesis 1:3.
Oh yeah, and God said, "Let there be light," and there was light.
Light dwelleth within him, right? Changes of the times and season refers to kings and kingdoms. Just a few Bible texts, if we want to look at those. Acts 1, 6 and 7. Maybe someone else pick up 1 Thessalonians 4, 16 through 5:1.
All right. For the Lord himself shall descend from heaven with a shout, with the voice of the archangel, and with the trump of God. Not Donald Trump. And with the trump of God, and the dead in Christ shall rise first. Then we which are alive and remain shall be caught up together with them in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air, and so shall we ever be with the Lord. Wherefore comfort one another with these words.
Okay, so we're seeing,
Wait, he didn't finish.
oh, I'm sorry.
Verse 5, chapter 5, verse 1. But of the times and seasons, brethren, you have no need that I write unto you.
Okay, so he's saying that the kingdom of God is going to be set up and established. But at that particular time, he doesn't need to tell us, right? Acts 1, verses 6 and 7.
So when they met together, they asked him, Lord, are you at this time going to restore the kingdom to Israel? And he said to them, it is not for you to know the times or dates the Father has set by his own authority.
Okay, Daniel 7:25.
This is a false setup right here.
I got it. And he will speak out against the Most High, is that right? And wear down the saints of the highest one, and he will intend to make alterations in times and in laws, and they will be given into his hand for a time, times and half a time.
There's God who sets up times, and then there's the false religion setting up their own times.
Okay.
Isn't that? That's
All right.
interesting. I never caught that before. Daniel, it's pretty cool.
Now this is a key verse in Daniel 2, verse 19. Let's read what do you got here? Then was the secret revealed unto Daniel in a night vision. Okay? So we're dealing with a common language with translations, with the English version, all that sort of stuff. So the root word vision is going to become important to us later in Daniel. So this vision here, this comes from a word, kazon. Okay, that's the root word of where you take a pizza and you fill it with all kinds of stuff and you roll it over and you bake it.
Calzone.
Calzone, right?
Well, calzone, that's like a pasture. I got a bigger laugh than you did. Sorry. Should be taken away from the teacher.
Man, what did they put in the food today?
So a kazon is a dream, a revelation. Okay, it comes from the root word kazah, to gaze at mentally. This is like an aha moment. It's not just a picture of a movie, but a clearer understanding. And then I'm not really going to get into the next a whole lot. The understanding of the Hebrew root word for vision becomes important as we see Daniel at the end of chapter 8 and chapter 9. He's also having a vision, but it's a different meaning. And that vision is marah. And that's just a different word, a different vision. So it's what we want to know when we get there is these aren't the same visions. Okay? A marah is a different vision than the other visions that we're going to be seeing upcoming in the next few chapters. So Daniel 2:31. Again, God is speaking in a language that Nebuchadnezzar can understand. He's using the image and idol. Daniel refers to this as a great image. Okay? Great image means divine. That word, the root word, is Rab, Aramaic for a captain, a chief, Lord, Master. Okay, this is a great image. This isn't just a man. Okay? We see two parts of the image. Verses 31 through 33 is the earthly part, and verse 34 is the heavenly part. Description of the image as John pointed out last week, begins from the top and it goes down. We see a rock cut out without human hands. That's the godly part. Where else do we see rocks or non-human hands visit us in Scripture?
Ten Commandments.
Okay, the Ten Commandments.
The rock that they got the water from in the desert.
Okay,
The cornerstone, the chief cornerstone.
yeah. Yeah,
Peter.
the hatch,
Avalanche.
the avalanche, okay. When the curtain in the temple was rendered,
Oh, it was a great earthquake.
and then also and later in Daniel, we see handwriting on the wall.
And upon this rock shall be the church.
So this is interesting. Verse 34 and 35. Let's read that.
It says, while you were watching, a rock was cut out, but not by human hands. It struck the statue on its feet of iron and clay and smashed them. And the iron, the clay, the bronze, the silver, and the gold were broken to pieces at the same time and became like chaff on a threshing floor in the summer. The wind swept them away without leaving a trace, but the rock that struck the statue became a huge mountain and filled the whole earth.
Amen.
So traditionally, we think this as what?
Christ is coming.
Okay, Christ is coming.
Or the kingdom of God coming.
Kingdom of God is
To
coming.
replace the kingdoms of the earth.
And what is, and he destroys the kingdoms of the earth, right? But what's the problem with this?
He says he breaks them all together, so,
At the same time,
yeah.
right? So we like to think in our linear thinking. Jeff?
Well, you have the beasts in Revelation chapter 13 that they're all they're all together. The lion, the leopard, and the bear are in one beast. Because what happened was Babylon, the beginning, but all of those traditions and religions and philosophies, all of that trickled down the statue to our age.
Okay.
So when God's kingdom comes, all of those things are still very much alive in society. So he breaks the whole image in pieces because those things are all still here.
Excellent.
Very
Excellent.
good.
Because we do. We have a tendency to think linear. This has
Yeah.
come and gone. This has come, this is gone. This has come and this is gone. And as we're studying through the Sabbath school lesson, not so, huh? You do have a historical aspect, right? But you still have that present day.
So yes, the entire image is in place, so the question is, what does the entire image represent as one compilation of all those kingdoms?
I just threw in a quote from Albert Einstein. The world as we have created it is a process of our thinking. It cannot be changed without changing our thinking.
Outstanding.
Okay, we've been taught to think linear. This is how, we try to read the Bible and understand it today. So that's just why I brought in a couple pictures. How would you describe this? Jeff, would you give a description of what do you see?
I could look at it different ways. I could look at it as two-dimensional, or I could look at it and say, wow, it's a really beautiful picture of mountains and a lake and things like that.
That's not a lake, I'd say that's a river.
A river?
James,
I
up close.
call it a tributary.
What do you see up close?
I see up close, trees,
One tissue.
water.
I see a beautiful pastoral scene.
I see many colors.
Somebody on the water,
With the
looks like,
pastorals.
or is there
There's a
something?
bird.
That's a little bird.
From
That's
afar.
a little bird.
Yeah, that would probably be Mount Washington in the background if you were just wondering.
Oh.
So it's kind of hard to describe this in a linear description, right? Because your eyes are jumping all around. You're seeing colors, you're seeing pastel or oils. You see, a little bird is in the center, a pond or a lake, snow-capped mountain. You're seeing these things. And the Hebrews, that was kind of their type of way of writing. They didn't start from point A and end at point B. It's more of describing a picture, so it's not necessarily sequential. Does that make sense?
Well, of course, everything is cyclical, the seasons are secular, life and death, so that's.
And they did see things in cycles.
Right.
And the cycles of the harvest, the cycle of the moon.
And so everything repeats, we see it ends. They saw everything ends and then begins over and ends and begins over and everything repeats.
It's kind of like the description we got of just like reading Daniel 2, where it's almost like a jigsaw puzzle where he starts with the edges, because we're kind of getting this broad paint stroke of Daniel 2, but then we start to see the details being put in as we start to read through, and you see the puzzle pieces just filling themselves in, and then suddenly you've got this complete picture. Yeah.
So Rose, at our church this morning, Rosella, she was listening to, somebody did a sermon on the woman on the well here in Barre some weeks ago. And she was just captivated by the sermon. And I guess she's heard it, she's listened to it several times over. And every time I hear it, it just grows. It grows. And that's kind of what we're dealing with, right? It should. If it's the living word,
That's right.
it should never be stagnant. There should be something new that's being created out of there. So if we do the linear thinking, and we say these are literal kingdoms that have come and gone, then we obviously got a problem. And we've kind of touched on how we resolve that.
Could I just add something to that? When you look in Revelation 17, you see the woman riding the scarlet beast with the 7 heads. She's called Mystery Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and abominations of the earth. And if you look through the scriptures of abominations, mostly it's connected with idolatry. And Babylon, we're told, is the mother of all that. And her children are still very much alive in the world today, and her way of thinking and her traditions and even her idolatry and practices very much alive in the world today. And we don't even realize how much of our society and traditions and things actually come from Babylon in ancient times.
And so that's what we're going to tackle next time, is kind of that statue. What are all those things that have trickled down to today?
Just thinking about what that image represents and what Pastor had talked about regarding Babylon and Egypt, and how one represented false religion and the other represented this secular, humanistic, materialistic society that we live in. And the image really is both of those together. It's a combination of the two, which is the society that we're in now, isn't it? We have a great movement of false religion, but we also have this great secular, humanistic movement as well. And they're maturing together.
And they will reunite at some point.
That's, yeah, and I didn't know how to word that. They will unite under one head and persecute God's church, God's people,
Would you?
So, can I just
Yeah,
ask?
well, please.
I wasn't here last time, so I don't know what things you covered. But you kind of briefly said that when he described the image the first time, verse 32, chapter 2, this image's head was fine gold, chest of bronze, silver, its belly, thighs, its legs of iron. So he's describing it from the top down.
Yeah, we're going to kind of cover that next
Oh,
week.
is that next time?
Yeah.
Oh.
John mentioned that as the introduction, when it was described.
Mm.
Yeah, so. Sue, would you like to have a closing prayer?
Sure. Dear Lord, thank you for the insights that are able to come to mind as we go through this material. I know, Lord, that for me, I need to come back, read again, think again, and I believe that's what you want of us. Not to just take things at face value, but to dig in and to be sure for ourselves that we are seeing the things that you have for us in your word. So I thank you. I thank you again for just leading and the ability to go deeper and to know you better. And I pray this in your name.